I've never seen people look at people as if they were dead. And some people, the ones who were knowledgeable, were looking at me as though I was dead. They expected I had 2 months left. By middle of January, we did the second CAT scan. Every single tumor had disappeared, totally. Even the hole in the bone has filled in.
Andrew Scarborough from England, I mean, he's a pioneer. Pablo Kelley. We're seeing more and more people, if you go on the web, these people said, I used to have stage 4 brain cancer and I'm doing really well. And you're starting to see more and more of these people who adapt the metabolic therapy. And they're not part of clinical trials. They're just coming on the web telling somebody, hey, here's my data, look at it, you can see I had stage 4 brain cancer and I'm still alive. And I'm doing okay. And I'm out 3 years, and I'm out 4 years. And you're saying, wow, this is unbelievable. Because most people are dead at 12 months.
But I had been to probably 3 years worth of doctors going nowhere. It was an amazing experience for me to go from what I seemed like was near death, suicidal in fact, to living life to its fullest, culminating with running a triathlon.
So at some point I just realized, okay, it's not changing, the weight's not coming off, and it seemed right around at that point is where things really changed. I was able to get on the ketogenic diet, and within 90 days I went from probably a size 14 to a size 6.
Hi, I'm Dr. McCullough, and I want to thank you for joining us. Welcome to Diet Against Disease, a radical and visionary approach to the way you look at your diet and how you fight against disease. I'm your host, and I've dedicated over 3 decades of my life to researching and understanding the fundamental causes of illness that can catalyze your journey into health, happiness, and healing. I am certain and convicted this 8-part video series is going to create significant and life-altering change for you in 2 very important ways. First, it will challenge your belief system when it comes to food. Not only what you should eat, but when you should eat, and how that powerful combination can optimize your health and well-being. Second, you will learn about a new revolution in disease reversal. Not only is food at the center of this hot debate, but it is also the antidote to end the suffering of obesity and countless diseases while creating a lifetime of freedom. It's time you found the tools to rise above the horror of disease. That's why I've teamed up with director and producer Jonathan Otto, who has dedicated his life to telling the truth through film to create a free resource that could change your life forever.
It's an honor to be giving you this gift alongside my friend, Dr. Joseph McCullough. Over many years, I've personally seen his commitment to giving information that has saved so many lives, and he's someone that I'm willing to stand behind. That's why I'm here. When I was a child, I can vividly remember the first time I witnessed deep suffering. I vividly remember the tears streaming down my face when I'd seen children in a foreign place called Africa with thin, emaciated bodies and a look of hopelessness on their face. I begged my mom to help them, and she helped me to work to raise money. And since that day, I think it's been the way that I've coped with life. Just finding ways to give back and respond through action. I've worked in humanitarian aid in several countries in Africa and Asia, and I've sought to tell the truth through film, through documentaries on cancer and autoimmune disease, to tell the world what's really going on. Over the years, I've seen disease take the lives of friends and family members just like you. When I discovered through interviewing thousands of people that so much, the vast majority of all this suffering was totally needless, and that my loved ones, they died because they'd been lied to or simply not given the information, I felt devastated. Truthfully, I felt angry. Most importantly, I was moved to action. That's why Dr. McCullough and I are determined to bring this gift to the world, to save lives. In fact, our mission is to save millions of lives, but most importantly, it's to touch your life.
Well, it's largely related to what you commented on earlier. You know, many of us are put into positions, not necessarily by, we're just given these positions of opportunity and communication in life, and I know I can make a difference. You know, for whatever reason, I've gotten to the position where I have a voice that can be heard. Not my personal voice, but the communication platform that we've established. Disease is destroying families. Children needlessly suffer and parents mourn. You're about to hear some true stories. These stories will reveal pain, sadness, mistrust, frustration, anger, and even loss. They will also reveal how our conventional medical system has failed those who have sought these types of approaches so many of us accept as the truth. So please join me as we walk together on this important journey of discovery in Diet Against Disease.
Hi, this is Jonathan Otto from Diet Against Disease, and I want to ask you for your help right now in sharing this documentary series with your loved ones. If Dr. McCullough's work has been a benefit to you, if you've enjoyed reading his articles, if it's helped you, if it's helped a family member, then I just want to ask that you help him right now in spreading the message of this film to your loved ones. You may be the only one from your circle of influence that has access to this film, that's seen it or ever heard about it, and so by sharing it, you're going to be giving them access to something that they would have never have found. Right now, this is a limited time screening. It's obviously all free for the public, and we are asking right now that you would click the share button below and get that out to your loved ones right away today, so they can come along with us in the whole journey and get a benefit from that.
So you found my son's story.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he died. He died almost 4 years ago, but he had an amazing quality of life in that 3 years.
So he gained how many extra years?
6 years from the time we started the diet. So he lived 8.5 years past his tumor diagnosis. But he'd had that tumor his entire life. I'm pretty convinced that he was born with it.
You had this amazing quality of life with your son. You got precious years. Miriam, can you describe to me the love of a mother? Like, what is it like to go through what you went through? Like,
I don't know if we want to go there because it's the hardest thing I'll have ever faced in my life. It was, you know, not just the knowledge that I was going to lose him, but actually having him in my arms when he takes his last breath. That's really the tough thing. And I understand that parents go through that every day, and that there are situations that were a lot worse than ours. There are children dying in wars, there are children dying of hunger, you know, dying of diseases. They're not being held in the loving arms of their mother when this is happening. So, our son was adopted, and when I think that could have happened to him when he was, you know, in the children's home, and there wouldn't have been that connection to anybody, he just would have been all alone. So I can't talk about this.
Yeah. No, it's okay.
It's almost 4 years out and I still have a hard time talking about it.
42, I was 42, and then rheumatoid arthritis, and some of the rheumatologists said I would end up in a wheelchair. You know, it was really like a medicated zombie with swollen joints. So to understand that, I was sometimes walking even with this pain, and let's say in a park or somewhere hiking, and I was slower than real old people. So I was really in so much pain that I could not even walk. But I was always determined to move, because I thought if I stop moving, it gets worse, and it did. So it was a very bad cycle I was in.
Now, what were the ailments that you were facing?
I had burning joints, pairs of burning joints, and tendons that were just on fire. I couldn't walk without really excruciating pain. Everything was swelling, and he said, your body is just, it just can't handle the inflammation. It's like it's trying to put out fires everywhere, and you have to slow everything down and give it the proper technique.
And how did it affect your quality of life?
Oh, I got depressed. You know, an athlete who can't exercise is you know, almost fatal. And I really did get depressed, and I said, gosh, I'm never going to be able to walk again without pain. I was fearful of things. My world just sort of closing in on me.
And tell me, like, how dark was that for you, if you were to be brutally honest?
Well, I mean, suicide did cross my mind, which is hard to imagine because I'm such a positive person.
I appreciate you being so open.
No, yeah.
Was contemplating suicide something that you could have ever imagined that you would think?
Not at all. In fact, I've had friends over the years who have killed themselves, and I didn't even go to the funerals. I was so horrified that they would think of that. And then here I was thinking of that. So clearly something like that can happen to anyone given the right circumstances.
For 3 years you would go to doctors trying to get solutions. You saw how many doctors?
10, 15.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spent how much money?
Countless amounts.
Thousands?
In fact, I went to a stress relief clinic in Philadelphia that was $30,000 just for that, for a week. And then I flew to San Francisco for another week for pelvic pain management. That was another $15,000. So yeah, I mean, it was catastrophic.
Did those therapies work?
No.
Did you have money to burn?
No, my parents paid those bills. You know, they didn't, first their daughter died, and now they were afraid their son was gonna die. And she died of cancer. And they said, we can't lose 2 children here.
I mean, I hope that no one ever has to see their loved one get wheeled down the hall to have surgery to remove a tumor that could have been prevented ever again. I mean, I just hope that never has to happen for anyone else because it rips you apart. So
you speak from experience, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Tell me.
Well, I lost my dad to cancer in November. So unfortunately, I had been doing this for several years already, knew about the ketogenic diet, and he had brain cancer, and he followed it and did fantastic. And when he came off of it, that's when things started to go downhill. But
why did he come off?
Because he started getting digestive issues from his other Western treatments. So, and his oncologist believed that the diet was causing the digestive issues. So it was very hard to be daughter practitioner fusion in one. There's so many different emotions that go with how could you lose someone when they're so young, and he was only 61, and why did it have to happen to the greatest person you've ever known? You know, why does it happen to the best people, you know? That was the hardest part. Like, why couldn't it have happened to some jerk? You know, what have to happen to my dad, who was just the greatest, you know, cared for so many people. So that was, you know, it's confusing, and definitely kind of makes you angry, and you go through the whole, like, I wish I could have done more, you know, I wish I knew more, I wish I could have figured out other things to stop it from happening.
I think I already knew about food as medicine. I don't know that I used those words, but I knew that nutrition would come from the inside out. But I was appalled when I went into the chemo lab to see that they had candy and cookies and soft drinks, and it was just crazy to me to be in a medical area where they would serve you the kinds of things that anybody would know, whether they had cancer or not, weren't supportive of good health.
Fearing for the loss of a loved one, clinicians around the world rarely deviate from conventional treatments or recommended medical suggestions, the standard of care, in spite of mounting incredible scientific evidence that alternative natural-based approaches can be far more effective. Diet is a fundamental component of that solution.
So I was diagnosed with all sorts of things, and none of which were actually real. They were just symptoms of other things. And through word of mouth, I came to Dr. Bush here, and he was so good with me. He sat me down, and I brought in all these pills that previous doctors had given me to treat me. And he said, you don't need any of that. Your body will fix itself if given the right tools. So he had my attention, and he gave me simple steps to cure myself. And these are things that anyone can do, such as eating, having a vinegar water supplement every day, and an alkaline diet, and sleeping on grounding sheets. I mean, some of these things seemed, crazy, but I said, hey, I'll try anything at this point. And then he had a special probiotic he had developed. I took that, and within 6 months, all my pain started going away. I had gotten depressed. I was an athlete, I was a triathlete, and I couldn't even walk without hurting before. He said, not only will all your pains go away, and your depression will go away, but you'll also do triathlons again. I said, come on, this is really far-fetched. And sure enough, within 6 to 9 months, everything went away, and I signed up for a triathlon, did it, and I was crying when I crossed the finish line because I didn't think I'd even walk again, let alone, I didn't finish in the top, 50, but just to finish the race at all was, it was a religious experience. I'm crying right now thinking about it. Because,
why?
Well, I feel like I almost died, and here I am now just living life to its fullest. And, now I'm like 90%, and I'm so happy with that. And really, this is something that anyone can do. And I tell everybody about this.
My name is Robin Hauser, and I first met Dr. Bush as a resident. So I was on 32 different prescriptions per day. That's a lot of meds. It took him like an hour to just look through them, write them down, and he later told me how painful that was for him, because this is what Western medicine is, this is what medicine does for people.
Tell me how things started to clear up for you. Yeah, how did you start to improve?
Changing my diet.
Wow, and so then how many of the 32 prescriptions did you get off?
I'm down to 6.
Robin is actually, again, an example of somebody who's been able to move from a state of health and healing in herself to really extending that healing mission beyond to her whole community. And she was recently on the front page of her local newspaper here in Central Virginia as an outreach that she put together. So she was noticing in her facility of low-income housing that many of the people were requiring EMS or emergency medical services on a daily basis. And so every day the ambulance was coming in the middle of summer. And she realized that every one of these episodes was related to dehydration from the heat that was in this apartment building. And so she went to her local grocery store and got a big container donated, got ice and water donated every day, and she would fill this tank with water and leave it in the breezeways in this building. And over the next week, there was a sudden drop in the ambulance visits, and within 2 weeks there had been none. Within 4 weeks there were none. And so she really took what was an incredible burden on the community and the cost of the medical system to zero by simply providing free water in this building. And so an extraordinarily simple intervention that really had a massive impact. So I think it's inspiring to realize that we only live our fullest, we only realize our full potential and purpose in a community of people when we love ourselves enough to really heal completely. And that's something that many of us are not taught. We're usually taught, go help everybody else and then you will be fulfilled. And that, I think, leads to a codependence with our missions, with our altruistic efforts and everything else. And so I think it's really powerful, this story of Robin's, to go from a state of complete collapse to a state of self-love and self-respect, healthier boundaries, and then from that springs the ability to impact the community fully. It's kind of like that moment when you're on the airplane, they say, put the mask on yourself before you put the oxygen on the child next to you. If we don't start taking that role in life and say, if I don't put the oxygen on myself, and I'm not taking care of myself, then I can't live that golden rule. We're supposed to love our neighbors as ourselves. But I would argue most of us are not loving ourselves completely at all. And so if we're living life with a lack of love for self, how are we ever going to achieve that golden rule?
Traditional medical solutions to chronic disease aren't working. They aren't even making a dent into the epidemic levels of the diseases that we're seeing today. They often have a whole range of terrible, harmful side effects on the patients and those around them. That's why using diet and lifestyle changes to address these diseases is so powerful. Not only are they far more effective, but they have no harmful side effects, and we're seeing incredible positive side effects. Holistic healing and renewed health doesn't just affect the individual, it can lead to the healing and revitalization of the whole community surrounding that individual. Robin's story is not a one-off. There is a mounting evidence from many scientific and medical researchers that diet and lifestyle changes really work at addressing not only the symptoms, but also the root causes of disease.
Can you give us any examples of people who've been able to successfully use metabolic therapy to?
Well, I think the one I in the childhood of brain cancer, Linda Nebling, rescued 2 little girls at Case Western Reserve who were hopeless cases, given up. They were treated with radiation and chemo and surgery, and they just weren't responding.
In your experience, if they've undergone conventional treatments like radiation and chemo, does that make it more difficult to reverse the cancer?
I think in some cases it does. And it makes it difficult because you damage the body's resilience to respond to a metabolic therapy. Because you're trying to rally your normal cells as participants in destroying the cancer. But if your normal cells have been damaged by a therapy, they become less effective in participating to manage the disease. So those little girls responded remarkably well.
I'm in remission now, that I don't take any medicine anymore, not even an aspirin or pain medicine I never take anyway, or I try to not take it. I'm more healthy, I believe, than ever before. So, I'm still dancing. And another very important part of my life happened actually last year, or like a year and a half before. So I was always running before I developed rheumatoid arthritis. And I didn't run for about 15 years. And last year I decided to run again. So I started slowly, and I still do only interval running, but I started to run again. And in the woods, I love to run in the woods, on trails. So I'm not only hiking, I'm running. After 15 years, that was a huge breakthrough.
People are suffering, their relatives and loved ones are suffering, and there's no need for it. The vast majority of these could be easily treated, and most of them can be prevented with adoption of these principles, which are not that hard. They're really pretty simple. It's a pretty simple concept. And the beauty of it is that it's easy to implement. People can take control of their health. They don't have to rely on these experts to control the situation. They don't need to take the drugs. They need some coaching, but it's a whole different model than prescribing toxic and expensive pharmaceutical drugs.
This is the sad thing about it. I agree, it doesn't have to happen. If you're going to, and the other term I get particularly upset about is when they say, oh, he's battling his cancer. He's not battling his cancer. He's sitting there and he's being treated by toxic therapies. He's not doing anything. He's just sitting there. When you do metabolic therapy, because you're now become part of the solution, you are battling your cancer. There's a different thing. You're in charge of your own destiny and your own soul, right? You just have to know that, and you have to have a therapy that actually works with your desire to live. Sitting down in a chair, in a lounge chair, and being infused with a toxic, poisonous drug is not the way to battle your cancer. It's the way to put you at risk for other health maladies, if not to kill you, right? So the whole concept in our vernacular, battling his cancer, is a misnomer. You're being brutalized by a system that is clueless as to the understanding nature of the disease. That's a tragedy. It's an industry, and it's an entrenched industry, based on the sickness and suffering of others, and with the false impression that what they're doing is the best there can be. And to tell somebody there's nothing more we can do after having brutalized them with these therapies is a tragedy in itself. What do you mean there's nothing more? I went to the best, and you're telling me to go home now and die? Go see a hospice? Go tap into we think hospice now might be your best option. What kind of nonsense is that? We've just spent $100,000?
I was surprised to learn that it's not just patients with disease who feel like the medical system has failed them. Doctors who became doctors to help people and who are doing everything that they were taught in medical school, they're faced with watching their patients die, sometimes on a daily basis. Some of these doctors are feeling increasingly frustrated that the tools that conventional medicine has given them are not doing anything to stop people suffering and dying from these terrible diseases.
Well, it could have been the most depressing day of my life, but it also was simultaneously the most hopeful day of my life, because I'd been practicing medicine long enough to know that I was doing everything I'd been told to do, everything I had learned to do in disease management, and my patients were dying. My patients were declining, not improving. I was seeing them age faster, not slower, with all of my interventions and effort. For somebody who goes into life, like every one of us I believe does, no matter if we're engineers or doctors or lawyers or construction or whatever we're doing, we all kind of go in with an altruistic motive. We would like to contribute positively to the world. And so when you go in with a lot of energy and you're going to do that, and then you're handed a toolbox that leaves you short. And one of the big turning points for me was when my patient committed suicide, this 18-year-old girl I'd been taking care of for years. When she committed suicide, it was a real calling point for me, which was I had done everything by the book. I had done all the right things. I had pulled all the right tools out of the toolbox, and not one of them had ever really bumped her from this downward decline to the ultimate taking of her life at such a young age. And that was the moment where I realized I didn't understand where I was at. And that was the beginning of my major depression. That was where I started to personally lose hope. Two incredible children. I love my kids so much. They're just extraordinary human beings. But there was a period of my life there when I slipped into depression where I could sit across the dinner table from them and look into their cheerful, laughing eyes and couldn't find the emotion of love in myself. I couldn't connect to the energy that they were and the awe that they inspired. I was too buried in my own milieu and mess there. And it was really the hope of my patients and the hope that we were healing machines yet that really pulled me out. And I think I was the first patient that was healed through my clinic. I think that when I started that center, I really decided, I'm not going to do anything here that I wouldn't do to myself first, and I knew, having been designing chemotherapy historically and working with cancer patients so much, and then in clinic working with all my endocrine diabetes patients, I knew I was giving drugs that I would never take myself. And so I set out for that. And so with the nutrition, I had to make myself excellent in the plant-based diet before I would even prescribe it, because it would just be hypocritical to tell my patients they have to go jump through all these hoops if I was unwilling to lead the way with that.
The safe, natural, effective alternative strategies that have yielded these incredible results are anything but fad diets. They are successfully fighting a range of very serious, frequently terminal diseases. Though many of these contrarian routes are well known, the exact specifics of what these natural alternatives include receive far less publicity. Which brings me to introduce you to Jacob Wilson, a highly experienced doctor and expert on ketogenic dieting.
So ketogenic dieting, essentially, normally our bodies are running mainly off of glucose as fuel, carbohydrates as fuel, especially with the standard American diet or most diets that are around. Ketogenic dieting, you restrict your carbohydrates typically to 5% or under, but definitely under 10% of your diet. Your fats generally will go anywhere from 70 to even 90% of your diet. Your proteins around 20% of your diet. And in that state, your body essentially switches its fuel source over to utilize fat and ketones as primary fuel source. Ketones being an alternative, very efficient fuel source. And we like to think of ketones essentially as water-soluble fat in a sense. Some people think of them as like the fourth macronutrient. But ketogenic dieting essentially is your carbohydrates are low enough, your fat's high enough to where you're running off of fat and ketones as your primary fuel source. People think high fat, I'm going to die, right? And I think that's a huge myth. If high fat combined in the presence of high carbohydrates is definitely lots of studies showing that's a problem. But high fat in the presence of very low carbohydrates, you enter in this other metabolic state that provides a ton of health benefits, improved cognitive function, and improved blood lipid profile, lowered body fatness. And then our lab showing that essentially you can actually not only lose body fat, but you can gain muscle. And we're also finding that like a ketogenic diet, not only is it healthy, but it sustains muscle when you're losing body fat.
The foundation for this series came from my book, Fat for Fuel, which was catalyzed by one of the best books I read 2 years ago. And I read about 150 books a year as I'm engaging in my daily beach walks. And that book was called Tripping Over the Truth by Travis Christofferson, who's actually in our series. And it was just catalyzing for me. It was an epiphany. I understood finally, even though I knew the details, that the foundational core of most chronic disease is related to mitochondrial function. And with Diet for Disease, we seek to implement one of the most profoundly powerful interventions, which is optimizing the fuel your body is using to power your mitochondria. So what are mitochondria? Well, they're the energy powerhouses of your cell. And nearly every cell in your body has several hundred, and some of the mitochondrial dense tissues like your heart, your kidney, your liver, your brain may have thousands of mitochondria in each cell. In fact, you have a quadrillion mitochondria in your entire body, and they make the energy currency of your body, which is ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. And it sounds like a mouthful, but this is what powers your body, and without it, you're literally dead in seconds. So it's all about improving the mitochondria's ability to make more ATP, and you make your body weight in ATP every day. Diet, as I said, is foundational, but there are other things that we're going to discuss in this series that augment or amplify the diet that are really crucial, because you could have the perfect diet, but if you don't get these other factors right and you have infections or toxins and you're not exercising, then you're going to sabotage your ability to reap the full benefits of health and perhaps overcome your health challenge. The initial catalyst for my book, Fat for Fuel, was to treat the 1,600 people who are dying needlessly every day in the United States alone. That was the primary focus. But a cyclical ketogenic diet is far more comprehensive than just treating terminal cancer patients. It's also great for the other chronic degenerative disease that we suffer for in this country, which is heart disease and diabetes and obesity and weight loss and skin and arthritis and acne. And one that's really important for many people is anti-aging. So this is addressing where the issue where our conventional medical system is failing miserably because they're using symptomatic band-aid approaches to treat what is the health symptoms we have rather than addressing the foundational cause. With this in mind, it's more vital than ever that you're free to make an educated personal choice. And to illustrate just how powerful eating healthy is, I spoke with Dr. Valter Longo. He's going to share his discoveries surrounding health and the contrast between commonly accepted ideologies and scientific proof. Well, Dr. Longo, it's really great to have the opportunity to discuss some of your findings on improving health, which seems to be related to recovering our ability to burn fat as our primary fuel. I wonder if you could expand on your initial thoughts on that and how you came to those conclusions that you're now recommending.
Well, our original thoughts were about the genes that control aging, right? So we started by just saying what makes animal live longer or any organism live longer. And then I think from there we went to understanding why they were living longer. So once you know that a mouse, for example, can live 50% longer and get many less diseases than, and this was the case for the growth hormone receptor knockout mice, and in fact for microorganisms we can make it live 10 times longer, and not only longer lived but healthier. And so then we had to understand how, and that's how we got to fasting, and fasting mimicking diets basically is a way to push the system into a reprogram, a new program that is based on protection, high level of protection, but also a high level of intracellular rejuvenation as well as cellular rejuvenation, meaning get rid of the cells that are damaged and turn on the stem cells, generate new young and functional cells.
But you are using food as a tool, as a resource. I mean, that seems to be the leverage you're using to activate these beneficial genetic changes.
Absolutely. The sugar is very low, but the carbohydrate is actually relatively high, and the fats are high, but the fat composition is very, very different. It's the fats and the fat profile. So now there's a lot of evidence, including large epidemiological studies, showing instead that the good fats are over and over associated with positive effects, And this is not just about calorie reduction. This is about nutri-technology. This is really important, right? I think, unfortunately, this system is almost non-existent out there, and there's a lot of speculation about intermittent fasting or whatever the intervention is without the proper foundation for bringing it then to the doctor and to the patient, and so that you make the doctor can make an educated decision.
So when we talk about diet against disease and cyclical ketogenic diet, many people question how this is the same or different from Atkins. Great question. Atkins was one of the pioneers, and he really started this whole process out many years ago. Not that he was the only one, because we've been using ketogenic diet in addition to the diseases I previously mentioned, but also for seizures. It's been really the standard of care for over 80 years for patients who have intractable seizure disorders who have failed to respond to conventional medications, is to use the ketogenic diet. So it does work for that. So how is this different from Atkins? It's different in some profoundly important ways. 3 primarily. One is that we pay close, careful attention to the quality of the food. Quality is key. But 2 other components is that you should not do this ketogenic diet continuously. That's why we insert the term cyclical. You only implement the ketogenic approach until your body's able to generate fat, or to burn fat as its primary fuel. Once it's able to do that, then you transition into a cyclical approach where you have more carbohydrates, where you go into this feast and famine cycling, which I'll talk about later. So that's a key difference. And the other is that we lower the protein quite dramatically. In fact, the level of protein that you're going to be eating is really probably more important than the amount of carbohydrates you're having. It has a lot of potential long-term complications. Not that you limit your protein continuously. Like the carbohydrates, you want to cycle in and out, but protein limitation is key. Here's Dr. Eric Westman to talk to us more about why people may be hesitant in adopting this form of dietary therapy, and also how effective it really is.
So the research that we did through the years was to really determine that the ketogenic diet or low-carb diet was safe. That the concerns about eating fat and all the heart disease those concerns really are unfounded.
You believe they're causing suffering? The fact that there's that misinformation that is causing people to doubt the validity of this tried and tested diet?
Absolutely. The current diabetes and obesity epidemic is basically because people don't know that they don't have to eat carbohydrates. So actually the eating of carbohydrates creates inflammation. So the sugars and the starches cause trouble in the body. In fact, can raise the blood sugar, and when the blood sugar is raised all day long, that's called diabetes. So the lack of knowledge about the ketogenic diet is actually detrimental because so many people can be helped. And being a fat burner, meaning you're using fat as your major fuel, it's actually a healthy way to live. And this is something new because 10 years ago, we were all convinced that if you ate fat, it would be very bad for you and would kill you. Well, the research now, and I was one of the 2 research groups in the US that started to re-examine the high-fat diets. The research now says that it's just fine to not eat carbohydrates. In fact, it can fix lots of the chronic health problems we have today in the US. The diabetes can be fixed by a ketogenic diet, which is a low-carb diet. Obesity can be fixed by a low-carb ketogenic diet. It's pretty amazing. So I do this every day in my practice at Duke University. We set up a practice 10 years ago based on the research that we had done. So I see the results of the ketogenic diet pretty much every day. But really the ketogenic diet is one that uses the principle of eating real food, of not having fake foods, of what you eat really matters to your body, so you want to get excellent nutrition. And that's something that most Americans just haven't been taught. And doctors get very little training in terms of nutrition. So I think that's one reason why the other approaches, holistic approaches, have come about. The medical mainstream doesn't take into account all of these other factors that are so important.
Why do you want to have the metabolic flexibility to burn fat and sugar? Now remember, well over 90% of the people in the United States are burning sugar as their primary fuel. It's the rare minority who are burning fat. But let me tell you how your energy is stored in your body. Only 5% of the fuel in your body is stored as carbohydrate, typically in the form of glycogen in your muscle and liver. Glycogen in your muscle can't be used systemically, can only be used in your muscle locally. So you have a very small amount of carbohydrate in your liver that can be used. 95% of your fuel stored in your body is stored as fat. And if you can't burn fat as fuel, then you're not going to have that metabolic flexibility to access this large source of fuel. Because the glycogen stores that you have, it's only 5%, and they're a relatively limited time. They will only last 12, 24 hours. So that when you go without food for that long, and even though you have 20, 30, 50 pounds of fat that you could potentially use, all those enzyme systems that were designed to metabolize it and really catalyze the transition to energy sources is unavailable to you. So your fuel goes down, you become hypoglycemic, your energy drops dramatically, and you just have these cravings, and the cravings are there for a darn good reason, because your body needs fuel to survive, and you can't access the fat. So that's the beautiful side effect, the artifact that results from implementing the strategies that we discuss in Diet Against Disease.
That's the best part about taking natural alternative approaches to truly heal disease rather than just addressing the symptoms. Often people are scared to venture outside of the realms of traditional medicine, but these other avenues are being proven time and time again to lead to amazing healing with none of the nasty side effects of traditional medicine. And as a bonus, they have many great side effects such as increased energy, vitality, and a return to healthy body weight, and a much more positive outlook on life.
Where some people see risk in trying natural alternative solutions, others see opportunity for greater improvement. Let's share in the extraordinary story of Hugh Henderson.
I was given as little as 2 months to live, and as much as 3 years to live if I had taken all of the traditional, conventional solutions like radiation, chemo, hormones. And that is just about when I met Dr. Bush and his team. And by chance, they were looking through my blood work, because I wasn't going to mention it to them. I was there just looking to optimize my well-being and performance. Traditionally, a patient who has a PSA of 10 is thought to be facing some kind of terminal condition. I had 76. Now, when I rejected all the traditional forms of medicine, there was quite some pushback. And one of my children said to me, "Daddy, you don't want to die, do you?" I said, "Of course not." It was very hard for them to understand all the reasons why I wanted to do it the right way. Most people fear doing most things the right way because there's a price, there's a cost, there's a risk. And in my family, we've just always taken that risk. We've seized the moment, and we've taken the narrow road. And almost always it works out. My father would teach me, easy is hard, and hard is actually turns out to be easy. So I just felt totally comfortable going this what I call scientific way. The other way for me was, it's not science. It's such a sliver of science to think that radiation and chemo and hormones even begin to address the issues. It's just not true. Now, I had 7 doctors at the time. My brother, who's a neurosurgeon, and a very broad-minded, almost holistic neurosurgeon. And then my son, Teddy, in Richmond, the pediatrician. And then I had other fabulous doctors, the most amazing of whom was Dr. Bush. And so I had all of these people just stunned. They just could not comprehend where I was coming from. And the ones who finally caved were my own children, one by one saying, "Dad, please do something. 2-3 weeks after that, it dropped to 2.45, which is extraordinary. 2.45 for a 66-year-old individual. It's what you would expect from a young athlete, male. So then the heat was off, and I was able just to continue the natural way and the spiritual way as well. It was amazing. In late September, I was diagnosed, and by the middle of December, maybe the 20th of December roughly, PSA had dropped to 2.45. By middle of January, we did the second CAT scan on a high resolution because we wanted to see how much the tumors had shrunk. Exactly. Every single tumor had disappeared, totally. The only clue that there was ever a tumor was that in my hip, the tumor had eaten a hole into the hip about that big. So there was a hole in my hip. Every other tumor had disappeared. That was mid-January. Persevere in the pursuit of the natural sciences. Take what pharmaceuticals that you need. That's okay. It'll just get you down the track further. But look at what is intrinsically the essence of cure, the essence of health, and be encouraged that there are so many incredible people in the field, scientists. There's so much incredible, much deeper scientific testing being done in that realm than people could imagine. More than being done in the hormone realm in cancer, for example, much more. So I would say be very much encouraged. Don't lose hope.
And so it's so cool that the most basic things in life, drinking, keeping hydrated, eating the food, and moving, those three pieces actually create the communication network. It's just a really easy take care of self model that once done, it makes sure that nobody gets lonely. And I see this happen all the time. We've got great examples of patients in this documentary right here. Once they start to heal, once they're taking care of themselves and they're doing those simple things, cell communication reestablished, disease disappears, what do? They immediately start communicating with their environment. They're out in the community, they're changing their community, they're changing their lives. And so we see this incredibly beautiful, almost fractal-like experience where if it's true down at the cell level, it's true at the macro level, and vice versa. Isolate somebody at the micro level, macro level, their microsystem is going to decay. And so we can change biology in an instant by changing the environment around a human being. And that's why I think our clinics is successful. It doesn't come down to one supplement or one cool technology or one thing that I tell my patients. We hold space. We hold space for you. We hold space for everybody. And I'd say that's what every single clinic in the world that's successful does. Come into this space, be safe, get educated, and make yourself the priority every day. The healing never comes from the doctor. The healing always comes from the patient. And that healing process is so inspirational, not just for the doctors that get to witness it, but for every other person that will walk into those or witness those in the community. And so we have an opportunity to inspire one another in our capacity to heal by getting reconnected. We're going to make the communication network at the cell level by eating healthy, drinking healthy, and moving our butts around. We got to get that motion back into life. And once that happens, that rejuvenation of life starts with the communication between those cell systems. I have a whole freaking army of patients behind me that are they're every day picking me up when I get distracted or get down, or I know there's a force of these individuals who I was unable to help the way I wanted to, that never saw it as failure. These people travel with me all the time. I've got many cancer patients that have died prematurely. 10-year-olds, 29-year-old amazing woman, Claire, 10-year-old Alyssa, one of the most amazing, spectacular human beings. Yeah, they're with me, they're real. I think about them constantly. They drive me to find more marriage and congruence with that purpose of mine. We can learn from one another's journeys, and if we don't, and we keep living in isolation, we will just be like another cancer cell in isolation, terrified and replicating itself, and not realizing it's part of a bigger community. And so our isolation as an individual is as dangerous as a cancer cell. We can cause great harm to the greater organism of humanity if we don't realize that we are tied together.
The whole explosion in Alzheimer's, I think, can be successfully treated with it. You know, you look at the preliminary work in there, and holy cow, you know, people don't have to let their minds go like that.
Nature is telling us that there should not be a degenerative aging process. Life should be bursts of life.
It's generally offered as the last option. Oh, every single medicine we tried has failed. Well, maybe we could try ketogenic dieting. By the time that's happened, irreparable damage has been done. So it should be the first line of treatment. You know, food can be medicine.
I've worked with those parents, I've worked with those patients, I've worked with those doctors, and I knew that it was considered to be outside the box. But I also knew that there were some brilliant successes.
I mean, I lost my whole left side to the point where I couldn't even swallow. I had to put a feeding tube in.
He was laid out in his bed and had tubes everywhere, and he was going back for brain imaging. And we just had a discussion about, you know, either he can check out now and he can give up and let his body go, or this is his opportunity to show his family and his grandchildren the most incredible journey that a human can take and the most courageous thing somebody can do, which is go after health and healing when there is zero odds.
Want to know more about how you can turn the tide of disease in your own life and the lives of those you love the most? Join us for the next episode in this series, Diet Against Disease, where we give you more information and discuss how many of the tools that you've heard about in this episode, such as the cyclical ketogenic diet, have been successfully used to prevent and reverse neurological diseases such as Alzheimer's, epilepsy, autism, and more. You won't want to miss it. Did you enjoy this film? Was it a benefit to you? Are you excited about the upcoming episodes? Now, with Dr. McCullough's work, it's touched and impacted so many lives, but few people get the opportunity to thank him in person. This is one of the greatest ways you can thank Dr. McCullough for his work, and it's by sharing this film. This is a very important piece of work for him to get into the world. It's a very important mission that he has and that we have together. And I just want to ask that you go ahead and pay it forward to your loved ones by liking and sharing this video, and also say your thank you to Dr. McCullough for the work that he's done, or the way that he may have touched your life, by hitting the share button below, getting it to your loved ones, and helping to spread this word for him. Thank you so much. Go ahead and do that below, and we will both see you in the next episode.